already, just so we know who we're talking to. A little bit about what Lauren's going to talk about today. Some problems are straightforward, but others are bigger, harder, and repetitive, more complicated, as you probably know with community gardens. So with a little shift in perspective and a little creativity and a willingness to grow, these problems can also create new possibilities. So in her session today, Lauren is going to talk about some of the problems that she sees in her garden environments in a way that moves beyond solutions and considers them as possibilities for growth, new partnerships, or new ways to meet the needs of our communities. Lauren Hickman is a program specialist in the Community Nutrition Department here at Tarrant Area Food Bank. She runs our TAFB Learning Garden with the help of volunteers. With 5 years experience at the Learning Garden and a lifetime of working with people and nature, Lauren has developed a strong awareness of potential problems and a strong desire to move beyond temporary solutions. Lauren's background is in the field of sociohorticulture. So Lauren, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I know you've got a presentation to share, so we'll let you get that situated.
Thank you, Becca. I appreciate it. So I'm going to just share this PowerPoint with everyone so that we can sort of look through these ideas together. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I hope that you've had a chance to enjoy some of the other live sessions that have already happened today as well. So I am getting everything set, and then we'll jump in. I know that, you know, problems come up in our garden just as they do in all gardens. And so we want to take a time today to really talk through those openly and give us a chance to brainstorm where they could take us. So I hope that some of you I know from out at the Learning Garden, and others of you we've met crossing paths. I look forward to meeting the rest of you who are joining us today. Thank you for chatting in who you are, where you garden, where you're joining us from today. That helps us get to know you a little bit better through this. As Becca mentioned, we will be sharing ideas through the chat box, so please do chat in any resources that you have through this. We're going to address a number of problems today, talk through them together, and then we will give you guys an opportunity to chat those in as well. We will be sharing the chat box with everyone who's participated today so that you can build on the resources that have been shared as well. So I do have the privilege of leading the Tarrant Area Food Bank's Learning Garden. It is my joy to work out there and to work with our volunteers. As happens in any community garden, problems do pop up from time to time. Most of those are simple problems, easy to fix. If a water line breaks, we can repair it or replace it. If a branch is too low and it might be too low for someone to walk under, we can cut that off. Those are what I consider fixes or easy solutions. So today what we're going to do is think a little beyond that. We're going to start thinking about those more complicated problems that tend to be repetitive, and we're going to start brainstorming where those could take us, because those can actually lead to possibilities for growth in our gardens and ways for us to serve our community even better. There are some fantastic sessions tomorrow on Saturday that will give some fantastic fixes and solutions for some of the smaller garden problems or even large garden problems that perhaps aren't taking us on a journey of possibilities, but just need to be solved. And so those are very important, and I'm glad that you're going to join us for those tomorrow as well. So we're going to be talking about some of the larger issues that can either lead to garden burnout, or they could be a starting point and a jump off for more growth or more support for our community. In this process, we are going to be thinking mindfully about some of these situations and problems. It can be a challenge as we do that sometimes to shift our focus away from focusing on the negatives of the problem. So we're going to really work together and work through that when that becomes hard, to really start using this as a time to brainstorm possibilities and think about where this could take us. We will not be giving solutions that are a one-size-fits-all. What is a possibility for our garden may not be a possibility for your garden, and what you can see possibilities for in your garden may not work for others. So we're all just going to share and use this to start practicing this way of thinking. So I hope that you'll enjoy thinking in this new way. Sometimes the first step in this process is for us to assume positive regard or positive intent when a problem comes up. We'll talk more about that as we get into some of the problems, but we want to start by thinking through the fact that people don't always intend harm to our garden. Sometimes they're just looking for a solution to their own problem. So we're going to try to stay flexible as we think through this. I will be sharing some problems today that I've had ideas about, problems that maybe we've seen in our garden or we have heard of from other community gardens in our area. And then we'll talk through, sort of use a framework to think through how we might use those as a starting off point for possibilities. And then we're going to talk about some of the possibilities that I've considered, and I hope that you will share other possibilities that you've thought of as well. When you share resources or ideas, please do share where you are, what city, what state, and that will help us all to know if those are resources that we might be able to use for the gardens that we work in. So we're going to get started at this point. Please know that we may not get to all of the problems that I'm hoping we'll talk about. If we don't, that's okay. That's what tomorrow's for. There are some breakout sessions tomorrow that will allow us to continue discussion. So let's start thinking about the possibilities. Now, when a problem pops up for the first time in our garden, we're always going to start with trying to just fix it or contain it the first time it happens. And that's completely normal, that's expected. Then when we can step away from it, that problem for a while and think through it, then we can move into more hopeful thinking about how we should handle that in the future. So not all problems are going to be solved in this way, of course, or they're not all going to lead to new possibilities. We'll be considering things that are repetitive, that make a difference in our community if we can move to a way to solve a larger problem, or if we can handle many problems with one new partnership or one new way of doing something. So here are a few things that go into that consideration of whether or not this is a problem you just need to solve, or if perhaps it's something that could take you further. We're going to use our imaginations and creativity today as we think. Now, of course, knowledge is also helpful in this process because we want to know what resources are already in our community so that we can know who we might want to partner with or seek out help from as we try to grow in our garden. So here's the first problem that we want to talk about today. I am certain that most of you who are in community garden work have probably experienced this. Many of you may also be home gardeners, and you may experience this if you have a front yard garden. You may see this happen. This may also be something that happens if you are a restaurant with a small container garden out front. You may have seen this happen as well. So in whatever way you garden, we're glad that you're joining us to help us brainstorm these problems. So this is the framework that we're going to use as we think through all of these problems. The how often does this happen question is one we're really only going to, I'm going to mention it right now. We won't consider it in detail with every question, but keep in mind that if this problem has only happened once in your garden, it may not be something that's worth spending a lot of time thinking about. You may just need a one-time fix or solution and you can move on. So what we're talking about here is something that's happening enough that you're starting to feel frustrated about it. So what are some of the related problems? So someone is taking vegetables from the garden. This is something that might be a problem in some gardens and might be a problem that's not a problem for others. So for us, we're the food bank. If someone's taking vegetables from the garden, we assume positive intent that they are hungry and that they are looking for food. So we may be addressing some related problems when we think about this. We may be addressing related problems that perhaps they're picking things that aren't ripe yet, and so they're not really getting the full benefit of the food. Or perhaps they don't know how to harvest, and so they have ripped the whole plant out of the ground. So there are some related problems, and what those are might affect how you address that as a possibility in the future. So go ahead and take some time now. If you have seen this problem come up in your garden and you have some ideas about other related problems that happen with that, please go ahead and chat those in. We will incorporate those into the conversation as is reasonable, and otherwise they'll be in the chat box so that we can all help support each other as we think through new ideas. So other related problems that I can think about are that sometimes people mistake one thing for another. So perhaps they think what they're harvesting is a fig, but it's actually an eggplant blossom. Those don't look alike, but that's one that's just personal experience. I've seen that happen. So we want to think through that as a related problem, damage to plants. We might see related problems that perhaps there's a lot of food litter or plant litter that ends up on the ground when that happens. Or perhaps if you're running a community garden where people are renting the plot, it can be a huge frustration if you've waited for 2 weeks on your perfect size pepper and you go to pick it and it's gone. It's a little bit different than it is for us, because all of the food that comes out of the garden that we are running are going into donations for people who need food anyway. So go ahead and chat those in. We also want to start thinking through, as part of our mindfulness process with this, we want to start thinking through why is this problem happening at our garden? What might cause this to be happening in our actual area? So go ahead and think through some of that. You may choose to chat that in. You may, if you think that there's information that's shareable, that would be great. For us, we have an open garden, and so that's just going to lend itself to people coming in and picking. That's part of what having an open garden means. And so we are aware of that identity that we have as a garden. What are other things that might cause that to happen in your garden space? Is it lack of signage? For us, if we're dealing with some of the related problems, is there a way that we could put up information about how to harvest something correctly that would help create a new possibility for education that would help address the problem that we're seeing? So please do share what other things you think might be causing that to happen at the garden. And then we have to consider what are the larger needs that are causing that to happen. So in this particular problem, one of the reasons that people may be taking food from the garden is that perhaps they're hungry. They don't have enough food to eat. Perhaps they're not within walking distance of a grocery store that actually sells fresh produce. They may be living in a food desert. Our garden is located right beside the 99-cent store, which sells dry goods, and they can get granola bars and processed foods and things of that nature. So people in our neighborhood are in walking distance of that, but it's quite a bit further to get to a grocery store that actually has fresh fruits and vegetables. So knowing knowing what the larger issues might be is very helpful. Some of our neighbors that come to pick figs during the day are picking the figs because they remind them of home. We had a wonderful neighbor who came by last week and talked to me about, asked if he could pick some figs because they reminded him of his grandmother in Guatemala who made syrups, and there weren't any fig trees nearby, and he was so excited to see them, and it reminded him of home. So start thinking through what the larger needs are in your community, because that will also affect the possibilities that we have when we address it. We also want to think through, once we start thinking about those larger needs especially, we want to start thinking about who in our communities are already addressing those needs. So in this particular situation for our garden, we are the food bank. And so we are an organization that is already addressing the need of hunger. And there are other organizations that are helping to address some of the needs that surround the picking of produce from our garden. And so we can think through things like transportation. If people need transportation to get to a store, well, there are organizations in our communities that are helping to find solutions to transportation needs. If we are seeing things happen where people are needing services related to new immigration, there are organizations in our community that are dealing with and helping with those needs already. And so we can start thinking through what kind of relationships might be possible to help address some of those needs. So then we can start addressing the possibilities. Once we've sort of brainstormed, and please do keep chatting in. I don't have access to see all of your information that you're chatting in, but I do see that there are chats happening. So thank you for sharing your ideas. I'm excited about that. Becca, do you want to communicate any of the things that have been coming in so far?
Sure. Lots of comments about melons and onions and things being stolen. Lauren, I know that you've mentioned at our Learning Garden, things that are very easily identified are stolen most often. Everybody knows what an onion looks like, watermelons, things like that. And I've been impressed, Lauren, with your solutions on kind of mitigating those problems, maybe planting them in different areas each year or hiding them amongst other things. Or maybe you just don't grow that thing because you know somebody's going to take it.
Yes. Thank you for sharing all of that. Yes, there are certain crops that we know are taken more commonly. And again, for us, our big concern is that people will harvest it before it's ready. We see that problem happen a lot with watermelons. Sometimes we know it's not ready to eat and someone will harvest it. So with that, perhaps some signage might be a good technique. If I know there are things that people harvest wrong often and we don't have signage up to help it with that piece, I do what Becca has mentioned. I sort of move things around. So I might move potatoes to a different spot than they were the year before. I might companion plant and put our watermelons under something else or next to something else. Watermelons are pretty obvious. They just are. And I don't have a great idea for watermelons yet. So if you do, please do share that. Potatoes and onions, there are some crops that I intentionally plant on the exterior of our garden and just know that people are going to harvest them, and that's okay with us. We can talk in about you see some of the possibilities that I've thought of or have seen other people do on the screen right now, and one of the best ideas I've seen is the Jubilee Garden that's near us. Offers free food plots, and so they have a number of plots on the outside of their fence that are for the community. They're intended for people to pick from them, and they do have signage that communicates that anything outside the fence is free and up for grabs, and anything inside the fence is for their community harvesters. So a few other ideas that I've thought of, I noticed early on in our garden that people naturally tended to barter when they came to harvest at night when no one was there. We would often find little gifts, little somethings that would be left on the table. And again, we assume positive intent. So I decided that those were in exchange for the food that they had taken. And that was their way of paying us for that. So one possibility might be to start an intentional barter system. Put up some signage that says, you know, if your water is available and open, you could put up a sign that says, you know, please water, and water a bed, take a tomato, something like that, or pull some weeds, take a tomato. So a lot of neighborhood picking does happen in evening hours. So one idea might be to all get together with your gardeners and invite the community and just have a picking session. And if you have something like a free food plot, then you might be able to, you know, demonstrate how to pick some of the things out of that plot. You might also have other food sources that can be given away at those neighborhood pick parties. Contacting your local food bank is a great way to get started with that, or some of your local food pantries. And that might be an option to pick up some emergency food supplies or groceries that you might be able to give out in that kind of setting. So also starting a pantry in a building near your garden, or requesting a mobile pantry. For us at Tarrant Area Food Bank, we do offer both of those options to become a partner with us. So I've included the website there. If you're interested in doing something like that, if you're seeing a lot of food need in your community, that might be one possibility for your garden. And sometimes signage is a great help. Sometimes people just don't know where to find food. Right now, especially during this time, food drives are happening all over our county and our 13 county area. And so sometimes putting up signs so to help direct people to other food sources can be really helpful as well. Becca, what other possibilities came in?
Teresa from Arlington, she mentioned that they did a mobile type pantry where they were giving away the emergency boxes that I believe it was through us. And she said that they found that fewer vegetables were being taken from the garden, which was interesting because the giveaway was at the parking lot right by the garden. You would think maybe that would draw more attention to the garden, but if the need is met, then people aren't going to come take anything.
That's great. Thank you, Teresa. I appreciate you sharing that. That has been something that I have wondered if others have had success with. If you have actually seen a decrease in picking from the garden with that. So I'm thrilled to hear that did actually meet the need and help supply people with food. Thank you for doing that. Let us know if you have other ideas and possibilities that you want to chat in. Feel free to keep doing that even as we move on to the next problem. I do want to mention that most of the resources and possibilities that I'm going to mention are in the Tarrant County area of Texas. So if you have a great idea for Austin, please share that also, and that way other Austinites can have some ideas. Becca, any other thoughts?
Yeah, we had someone wondering about, there's always the question, do I fence the garden in or do I not? So, could you speak a little bit to the idea of the fence, whether it's an actual, chain link wooden fence or a natural barrier of sorts, like blackberry bushes?
Absolutely. That is a decision that you might make based on the kind of garden that you have. For our garden, an open garden is the right thing for our setting because it allows people to walk in, see the garden, and enjoy the space and get food when they need it, even when we're not there. And that's a good thing for us. Fences can be a good way to protect the garden. They can also be something that sparks the desire to vandalize the fence and get in regardless. So I say that not as a complete deterrent. If you have a solid wall that no one can see through, then that might be a complete deterrent. if if your goal is to not have anyone pick because you have, you know, those who have paid to have their plot and they would really like to harvest the food because their family needs the food and that's why they're gardening, then a fence might be something worth trying. A chain link fence is probably not going to keep anyone out if they're determined to get food from the garden. Know that if you do put up a privacy fence or something of that nature, just think in terms of the fact that you are also eliminating your ability to see the needs in your neighborhood. So if you know that there's a food need, you might also have another possibility in addition to the solution of the fence. A fence would be a solution, right? That's a great way to protect your food and your gardeners from food loss. And so that's a really good solution to the problem of food being picked. And also you might consider what possibilities could happen there to meet those other needs. Thank you for asking about that. I think that's a really important question and it may be right for your setting. Any other things that we want to discuss before we move on there? Okay, we're going to go ahead and jump ahead. So here's another one that we see in an open community garden setting. Someone is sleeping in the garden. And this is another one that, you know, of course, the first time this happens, you're going to need to find a solution. You're going to have a fix. You're going to try to figure out how to help that person and your other gardeners be taken care of in that moment. Then as we step back, we can kind of think through what are some of the related problems that might come out of this. So are there a lot of living supplies that are ending up in the garden because of this? Is there damage to the garden? Are there safety issues? If it's very, very hot outside or very, very cold outside, is there a risk to the person? What other problems might be related to this issue? How often is it happening? And then start thinking through why it happens at the garden. I know that one of the reasons that this sometimes happens in gardens is that people feel safe there. People feel like it's a peaceful place. It's a safe place to rest. They might find shade from heat. They might find a water source. They might find food to eat. And so there are a lot of related needs that can be met in a garden space that can't be met if you're sleeping under a bridge, that can't be met if you are sleeping somewhere else that's not a permanent shelter. So start thinking through why it's happening at your garden. It may not be that people want to destroy your garden. It may be that it's a safe space, so it may be a complement to your garden. And then start thinking about the larger needs outside of that that are causing someone to need a place to sleep when they don't have a place to live or a shelter. What is it that's keeping them from shelter? Is it a lack of transportation to get to temporary shelter? Are there other reasons that they've become homeless, like medical issues and expenses that have prevented them from making rent? So there are a lot of reasons that homelessness happens. There are a lot of reasons that someone might not be completely homeless, but need a place to sleep for that night and not feel safe. They may be trying to escape a situation that doesn't feel safe at home. And so we can kind of consider what other needs might be happening and then start thinking about who in our communities are addressing those needs. There are shelters that are addressing some of those needs. There are housing solutions and homeless coalitions that are addressing some of those needs. We can also consider some of the needs that could be met that aren't housing related. So if you find that perhaps people are using your water for other purposes besides drinking, then perhaps if there's a local business nearby that can offer showers, this is a solution that I have seen our partner in our garden effort use. They have started offering showers and laundry options for the people that need it in our community, which is an amazing service and way to help others. So we can start kind of thinking through and addressing those needs. So we'll start thinking about some of the possibilities in our space. There is a great homeless coalition in Fort Worth. There's DRC's rapid housing team has been helpful in our setting, in our situations. If someone is homeless with severe medical issues, they have been very helpful in the past. True Worth Place is a wonderful resource in Fort Worth for day needs for those who are without homes in our community. And so sometimes a possibility might be partnering with one of these great organizations. Some of the ideas that we might have may just be transportation to get them to some of these places. So offering bus passes to help people get to shelter. It's one thing to say you can't sleep in the garden, right? That might be a temporary solution to say you can't sleep here. To give them transportation to get somewhere else and information about where to go takes it a step further than that. And then building partnerships with those organizations might even take you a little bit further down that journey. The last one is just something that I have seen online. I have not been to this location, but I have seen some homelessness issues are dealt with by creating little mini villages of tiny houses, and there are gardens as part of that community. So if you really want to think big, the possibilities could take you to even more distant places with that. Becca, what thoughts have come in on this?
We have a question. Well, first, Teresa had a similar example of someone sleeping in the garden. They were actually sleeping in their greenhouse, which to me sounded really cozy. But they did a similar thing, was the church let him in, use the facilities, things like that. So being welcoming and figuring out what the situation is before, I think, reacting is important. And then we had a question, and I don't know if I don't know if you know this, maybe you do. If you have any information on like an herbal garden sanctuary that might help with stress, if there's any resources out there that might, give some suggestions on how to set that up.
That's a great question. I like the idea. I think probably the place to start would be to learn more about herbs for relaxation. Which you would probably just start with, I would start with a Google search. That's where we all start most of the time these days. Learn about lavender and some of the herbs that you can grow in our area that are good for relaxation. I don't know much about starting a garden of that nature for those who are sleeping in the garden. But you might want to this may be something you want to do at home just for your own personal relaxation. And I would love to know more. I hope that you'll follow up on that some and then let us know what you find out, and I will do the same.
I did comment in the box, but Vicki responded. Vicki is doing one of our presentations tomorrow, and I know she's involved in a lot of different gardening groups and plant societies in the area. So Vicki, if you've got any other suggested resources, she did mention there is a meditative garden at a church near TCU. It's on Loudoun or Canty. Is it University Christian Church? Do they have a meditative garden? I can't remember, but I'll see if I can find some maybe before I send out the email afterwards. It's not UCC. Okay.
I know that there are gardens that are built as part of a labyrinth or a meditative space. So I'm excited to see those resources also. Okay, so this is another problem we hear from community gardens frequently. We just can't get it all done. We need help, or we're just going to shut the garden down. We don't want anyone to give up because you're frustrated that you can't get it all done, right? We all go through that period where we just can't keep up. It is not a one-person job for the most part. For most of us, especially for community gardens, you need a community, a strong community. So we can think through some of the related problems with this, but I think that you may have ideas on that already. it might be that there wasn't a strong team established at the beginning. It might be that people have had illnesses or time commitments that have come up that they weren't expecting and you've lost your team. It might be that people have found that the heat is something they can't handle, or the cold is something they can't handle. So what the related problems are might help you decide how to handle it and how to approach it, and what possibilities there might be for moving forward. You might think through how often it's a problem. You know, are you having a stressful day because you can't get it all done, or is this something that you just can't ever keep up with? Why is it happening at the garden? This one's a little bit different. Usually when you have this kind of question with this kind of problem, it's either because the garden's maybe too large, or because you don't have enough help, or some combination of those things. So thinking through some of those problems and why it's happening. Larger needs or causes are probably going to be related to some of those related problems that we were thinking about with this particular situation. But please chat in any other ideas you have on needs and causes, because this is one that will end community gardens if the people who are running it feel like they can't do it all and they don't have enough help. So please chat in if you see some larger needs that kind of cause this. We don't want burnout to happen. We want your garden to be sustainable. Now, others who are addressing this need in your community, oftentimes these are going to be volunteer organizations, people that help, right? There are a lot of organizations whose sole purpose is to help. So we want to try to find some of those partners. So here are a few ideas that I've had. Please chat in resources and ideas that you have, because this is a really important problem that affects everyone in gardening work at some point. So volunteer services, this is where we go when we need more help. Our volunteer department helps us find those. So that's a great resource for us, especially. You'll notice I put our link there, so we'll hope you volunteer with us if you're wanting to kind of get a sense of how we operate our volunteer work days. Sometimes if you're already volunteer run, but you're having a hard time getting volunteers, sometimes seeing how other people have their volunteer work day structured can be a helpful starting point. So that you know how to meet the needs of volunteers, just like we have to meet our needs and the needs of our gardeners and the needs of our community. It's also important to address the needs of those who are volunteering with us and make sure that they're taken care of as well. Texas Master Gardeners, fantastic resource. Gardeners who have training in horticulture. So this might be a good group to contact in your area. I put Texas Master Gardeners because that's where we are. Tarrant County Master Gardeners are our specific branch organization, but Master Gardeners are all over the country. So definitely look into that if you're needing expertise or if you're needing help with volunteers. Perhaps they might be willing to adopt your garden as a project. That might be something to look into. Americorps got us through a time when we were not able to be open to public volunteers. Our Americorps volunteers were fantastic in the garden. They were really helpful and kept our garden alive and growing. So you might look into what it would take to get that sort of help for your space. Partnering with schools or organizations that could bring groups out. Learning is really important, and right now especially people want opportunities outside, so this might be a good resource for you. If your neighborhoods around your garden have associations, it might be a good place to start. Reach out to them, see if they'll spread the word. Maybe you can set up some times for them to come out as an association to help. And you may also want to consider letting people take some ownership of different sections of your garden. Sometimes businesses or volunteer groups would love to put up a sign that says cared for by, and that can be a really good way to get help also. Becca, do you have anything coming in that we want to share right now?
We just had some comments about Americorps members, that other folks have had some great experiences with them. And then maybe you know this since you worked with our Americorps members more closely. I know there's several different categories of Americorps members, and we had some disaster relief they were a special group of Americorps. Most receive a stipend, but do you know of any that don't, that are more like one-time basis, or is it kind of like a whole, they're in like a sign up for a time period, don't they?
They, for us, those who worked with us were on a contract. So they had a 2-month contract with us, or I think it was 300 hours that they committed to. I do not know the answer to your question about one time or a shorter term AmeriCorps volunteers. If anyone finds out the answer to that, please feel free to share it. If I find out the answer, I will try to find a way to share it with all of you as well by email later. Thank you for that. Okay, so this is another one that we see. This may not be a problem in your garden or your space if you have plots that are rented or owned by individuals or groups, because they're planting and taking home everything that they grow. And so this may not be a problem in your circumstance. For us, we grow things in our garden and then take them to our nearest food pantry partners or partner agencies. And so every now and then we'll grow something and we take it over, and then we hear from the pantry, you know, really people aren't taking this. And so then we have to think through, what do we do with that problem? Because it's, you know, taking food, you want people to be able to eat the food that you are giving. And this is sometimes a larger problem that can affect food banks as a whole, even produce that's coming from other sources that's not coming from a garden. If someone doesn't know what to do with the produce, it's difficult to cook it. So let's kind of think through some of the related problems there. Maybe a lack of knowledge of what the produce even is. It may be lack of experience cooking that particular vegetable or fruit. It may be that there is a cultural stigma on that particular vegetable or fruit for whatever reason. It may be that the produce quality does not look high enough that someone feels safe eating it. So these are all related problems that happen all the time. And so it's important for us to understand why people aren't taking it. And how often it's happening. If you have one week where you have 100 pounds of tomatoes and they don't all get taken, that's not the same problem as if you have something that never gets taken. Why is it happening? Now, this typically doesn't happen at the garden. This usually happens somewhere where you're delivering produce, but think through what it is about your particular setting or situation that's causing that. And what are some of the larger needs? Education is a huge larger need that's related to this. Education about varieties of foods. We are very limited in our grocery stores on varieties, and so if you are accustomed to only seeing one kind of eggplant and you receive a different kind of eggplant, you may not know that it's an eggplant. So larger needs might be lack of variety, lack of experience shopping for or cooking it, lack of knowing what to do for it is the one I hear most often. I don't know what to do with that. Or just they're not sure if it's okay. So who's already addressing these needs in our community? Sometimes this is chefs. Sometimes this is farmers at farmers markets. Farmers at farmers markets do a fantastic job of educating people who are picking up produce from their farm stands. They are able to say, here's what to do with this. Here's why this is so good. Here's how it tastes. Chefs are able to do a great job of communicating the value of the vegetable because they can plate it well. They can express the best flavors in the best ways. So how to cook it and what to do with it are two of the biggest resources. So finding those people in your community who are really good at communicating that information can be really helpful. We are fortunate enough to have a kitchen in our food bank. And so our community kitchen program is a wonderful resource for us. And there's a culinary school right up the street from us that are fantastic to work with. And so there have been times when we have something that perhaps people don't quite know what to do with, kohlrabi or bok choy, something that's a little bit new. And they're able to prepare it and plate it. And then we have some pictures of what it can look like available to use. Probably the biggest and best resource that we have in this particular problem that has created a host of new possibilities for us is recipes, creating recipes. Having recipes to go with the produce opens all sorts of doors for people. They know what to do with it. Our recipes are now shared online. So all of our Go Healthy recipes are on our website. And so having someone that can create those recipes is a fantastic resource with nutrition information and directions. Those recipes are actually taken to our pantries anytime we take produce. I know that Central Food Bank has some great recipe cards that they use that have just quick, easy directions about how to prepare it. So there are great resources that can be given with your produce to help your community know what to do with that. And I hope you'll share some other possibilities and ideas. Labeling them is sometimes a huge thing that we don't think about. Having cooking demos. I know that our Cooking Matters team does an amazing job of, we can't do it right now, right? Everything's a little different right now, but doing cooking demos in our pantries of items that aren't moving very well can make all the difference. Becca, what ideas have come in?
We had some suggestions of Greg's presentation from earlier also addressed some of these issues too. So if you missed Greg's presentation this morning, it is recorded for tomorrow as well. So if you check out the Planning Your Donation Garden, we did touch on some of these issues also and shared some other resources. Kind of talking about donating to soup kitchens, and that AgriLife Water University is also putting out a dinner tonight video on YouTube as well. So that's another great resource. I've seen a couple of those and those are great.
Great. Thank you, that's fantastic. Good ideas. So this is a problem that has come up from some of our community partners. So if you have a restaurant, if you have a culinary school, if you create food, if you cook food, this may be a problem you see, that you have a lot of food waste happening. So we are short on time, so I am going to kind of shorten some of our mindfulness process, but do go through the steps here. So related problems might be that you need your dumpster is filling up quickly. It's costing a lot of money. You might find that your your cooks are wasting a lot of food. You might find that you have a lot of food left over because it's just not selling. It's already been prepared, but it's just not selling. So think through what some of those related problems are so that you know how best to approach it and what possibilities and doors it can open. Why is it happening? Of course, this isn't at a garden, right? This would be at your place of business. But why do you think it's happening? Is it that the food is not being used to its maximum potential? Is it over purchasing? Is it a cooler that's gone bad? So start thinking through those larger problems and what may be causing some of that to happen. Then you can also be thinking about some of the larger needs in your community. So our culinary school that I mentioned that's up the street from us, the Culinary School of Fort Worth contacted us a couple of years ago and said, hey, we have a lot of food scraps from teaching our students, and we know that you need compost and we have all this food waste. Can we partner? And that has turned into an incredible partnership for us because it's reducing the larger need of keeping food out of the landfill. It gives us compost. Our volunteers are able to compost all of that. And so think through who's already addressing those needs in our community. The city of Fort Worth right now is doing a fantastic job of starting to address the larger needs of food waste. Tarrant County Food Policy Council has a working group to help manage food to keep it from being wasted. So find out who's helping with these issues. Here's the email address if you're interested. If you're in Fort Worth and you want to talk more with the materials management team about the city's composting program, definitely do that. Contact local gardens that are around you. Local gardens, if you're watching this, community gardens, and if you need compost and food scraps to make that happen, you might contact some of your local restaurants and see if they're interested, or some of your local coffee shops and see if they want to provide coffee grounds. Also, if you're finding that you have a lot of prepared food waste, you may want to partner with some organizations that are trying to give out free meals to those in need. So perhaps you could supply some of that. Of course, you'll have to think through the details of how to do all of that in a food safe way. But when we consider the possibilities, then we can consider how to make it happen. We definitely can't make anything happen if we don't start with the idea. So I'm going to move on to the next one, but of course, Becca, feel free to chat in if you see something that you want to share. We want to keep transforming. Compost is probably the best example, right? It's a great metaphor for what we're trying to do in this presentation. We want to take our problems and we want to turn them into possibilities. And compost is like the best example of that. We want to just turn it on its head and turn it into something good for our community instead of something bad. The insects and weeds are winning. So this is, another one that has some solutions, and there are going to be presentations tomorrow that will help you think through those solutions and those fixes. Hopefully the fixes are enough, and then it doesn't become a problem that's so frustrating it's trying to defeat you. But do think through all of these steps so that you know if this is something you can deal with on a larger scale. I'm going to just move on to the possibilities, unless somebody wants to throw out a situation or a specific on the problem itself. So here are some ideas for insects and weeds that are defeating you. If it's become such a repetitive problem that you need larger possibilities, you can make it a part of your programming. Maybe you want to build a chicken tractor or hire some goats to come eat all of the grass. Perhaps you want to actually have a bed if you have lots of weeds, maybe you just create a bed around it and talk about edible weeds. Have someone who's experienced in foraging teach that class though. Maybe you just need a really thick layer of mulch and a weed barrier. Chip Drop in our city is a great resource for that, or having a local tree trimmer that can come drop some mulch off for you. Our city offers free mulch, so some great resources if you start looking around. Partnerships with those can be really helpful. You may also have schools that are doing a lesson on insects. You may have a chef that's experienced in knowing how to prepare some of them, or you can give them to chickens. Master gardeners, if you just need education or you need volunteers, or signage can be great too. If you have a big brush area that's intentional for wildlife and that's your goal, then you might just use signage to turn pests into an education opportunity. We are right at 3 o'clock, so I want to make sure that we're respectful of your time. We can end on this inspirational quote to remember that not all the weeds in our life are problems. Sometimes we just need to know where else to put them. If anyone would like to continue on, I'm happy to do that, but I do want to try to keep it at an hour. Becca, thoughts?
We've had some great suggestions for weeds and bugs. Vicky's pushing hard on her geese and duck solution. So I think maybe we all need to go invest in some critters to help us manage our properties a little better. And you spoke to that a little bit too with the chickens and goats. Creating that whole ecosystem. I mean, everything has a place and can definitely help manage some of those problems, but it's not possible for everybody to have those things there. And then Teresa spoke a little bit too about a large area, 50 foot by 30 foot, that they covered with landscape fabric and planted through the landscape fabric.
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah. So definitely some good solutions, and we'll have more technical sessions tomorrow to talk about some of those things. Lauren, did you have anything else as we finish up today?
I'm just going to leave you with the problem that I wish for all of you, and that's this one. I hope that you have to find a possibility for that problem. Keep sharing, keep growing, and we look forward to seeing you more tomorrow and hearing more ideas.
Wonderful.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Lauren, for your wonderful presentation and ideas, and everyone for contributing to the chat box today. I'll send out an email afterwards to everyone with the chat and the other resources that we said we would send to you. Here's Lauren's contact information if you would like to connect with her. She's a wonderful resource and has a lot of experience in this area and would be happy to connect with you. And we'd love for y'all to be involved in more of our programming. So thank you so much, Lauren. Thank you, everyone else. This is our last live session of the day. So y'all watch for that email at 8 a.m. tomorrow. It's going out, and you're going to get a link to all of the rest of the conference resources. We have recorded sessions, breakout sessions that are on a schedule. Those are going to be super casual. Just jump in for a nice conversation with some other people. Those are going to be through Zoom meetings, so you will be able to see faces and actually talk with people instead of just chatting. Join us for a virtual lunch. You can make your lunch from some of your garden produce or farmers market produce. I've got my meal planned out for tomorrow, and we can just kind of eat and chat together, very casual. So lots of great things planned for tomorrow, and I look forward to see some faces rather than just chatting with y'all, and hope we can interact a little bit more. We did have one last question, and Teresa, you might be able to address this if you're still around. Wanted to know how to manage fire ants under landscape fabric. So I know Lauren's got a solution that we use at the Learning Garden, but it's more of an open area solution. But we'll see. So far, there has not been a problem, Teresa says.
Under weed cloth, I would, hopefully your weed cloth will keep your ants from getting there in the first place. But if you do have a problem, you might cut a hole in it, and then you can pour a solution of diluted orange oil. So a tablespoon of orange oil mixed with a gallon of water down into the mound, stir it up first, pour it down in there. Corn gluten can also help some, but that's a hard one. So good luck with that problem.
Yeah,
good luck finding a solution to that one. I don't know how that could become a possibility, but I wish you luck thinking it through.
I don't think they're trainable. I don't think we can train fire ants to do anything good. So maybe no possibility there.
We'll see.
All right. Thank y'all so much. Please stay safe.